Hello and welcome to the Mystic Cast, where you join me, Jack Stafford, a student of metaphysics, as I talk to a variety of guests to better understand the teachings given by the masters through the Aetherius Society, the new cosmic religion for the Aquarian age, incorporating all yogas, Christian mysticism, theosophy, UFOs, and much, much more. Please note this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, my guest is Darren Ball, who helped me write that introduction. Hello, Darren.
Hey, Jack, great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
It's great to be here. You're one of the main figures behind the Aetherius Society, as one of the engines. It's one of the key cogs in the master cog.
Well, I think Aetherius Society is a big team of people around the world and of these many contributions that make it possible. I'm privileged to be a part of that team, and I hope to be so for a very long time.
Because you have a full-time job, yeah, but you moved to London so that you could work for the Aetherius Society in your non-working hours.
Well, I do have a full-time job. That's right. I have my own business called Who's Fabio, and we help startup businesses to go from idea to the first round of funding. So my my professional life that's what I do together with a business partner of mine, which is work I enjoy for sure. The story of coming to London is a bit more complex than that for sure.
So what I want to speak to you about, I want to narrow it down because it's just something simple, some easy question you can answer, like the meaning of life and why we're all here. If you could just do that for me in the next hour, that would be great.
Oh, I thought you were going to give me 1 minute to do that, so I'm glad you said it. So if you gave me 1 minute, I would say, spiritual evolution through experience. That's sort of like the headline that we're talking about here. But if we want to break it down, yeah, there's certainly a lot that we can go into here, which I'd love to share as part of the show. I think, the first thing to say is that the meaning of life as a question is often one of those questions that people think are completely out of their reach, something unknown and unknowable to them. Some people may never even try to search for the answer to this question. But I think, if we to really discover what life is about and why we're here, we need to start asking this question. If we want to make the most of our time here, we need to start asking. It's not even about just leading an examined life. It's about leading an examined life in the light of the spiritual truths that we have been given. Spiritual truths that we have been given throughout the ages. And in terms of my influence and inspiration from Master of Yoga, Dr. George King, and the enlightened beings from other worlds who spoke through him, giving their teachings to Earth, which of course is the subject of this podcast, right? So for me, I think that, often people will ask this question, what's life really about? Where's it going? You might wake up for work one day and just be like, gosh, what is this all for even, right? That's the kind of, everyone has that experience at some point in their life. And, for me, that question became more and more pressing. There's something urgent that I wanted to find the answer to.
Yeah,
And
people say they talk about, they try and answer the question for themselves, like happiness or to give life meaning. I mean, what sort of answers did you have before you
I
had
think,
this answer to talk about?
that's a really good point, because if you look online, for example, when you talk about the meaning of life, you're not going to find necessarily deep esoteric truths. You're going to find people who have answered the question about how do you give life meaning? How can you live a life of greater meaning? How can you feel a sense of purpose, right? Which are all valid questions in the sense that, people still want these things, right? And there are good answers out there that ultimately lead to things like, serving other people, making a difference, which is the essence of what we're talking about too, which is good, right? I think it's fantastic. It's a good message. But it's not just about the relationships you have. It's not just about feeling like you're committed to a project that's worthwhile when you wake up every morning. It's not just about reconciling or making peace with your past and, the struggle and the suffering that you face. It's more than that, right? There's a deeper and more profound reason that we are here. And I think that's what we can talk about. That's what we can talk about today.
So that's teachings exclusive to the Aetherius Society. These are not things you've heard from any other organization.
They're definitely not exclusive to the Aetherius Society at all. I think these are age-old teachings that you can find, if you're looking for spiritual truth and teachers throughout the ages. I think what the Aetherius Society has given me, though, is real clarity and also bringing the whole story together, and the quality and the simplicity of the teaching is unlike anything that I've seen previously. That's what I would say.
Okay.
So
Where does it differ then? What's the key?
sure. I think, for example, Master of Yoga Dr. George King was absolutely adept in simplifying into terms that we can all understand in layman's language what some of these deep and esoteric truths mean, right? Truths that we have been given previously, but which he is able to distill down into one sentence, even, or into, a few words. I guess if we're starting at the beginning of trying to answer this question, we can go to, there's three things I think we could cover. And for me, the big questions that help us to understand and grasp the truth about the meaning of life are essentially understanding God's purpose for the whole of creation, understanding what that means in terms of our own life purpose, the reason why we're here. And then also, what does it mean, therefore, to live our life in the light of these spiritual truths? What do we actually have to do, on an everyday basis? In practical terms, what does that mean that life is really about for us? And if we go to the beginning of that, so, what is God's purpose for the whole of creation? There's this amazing extract from a lecture that Dr. George King gives, where he's talking about the how creation happened, which is sort of extending our understanding of this concept of the great outbreathing, which they talk about in yogic philosophy. And basically in this lecture, he talks about how in the beginning, there was only God, and it was perfect and unmanifest. And then for some reason, unknowable and unknowable to us here on earth, God chose to create the universe out of itself. We don't know why God chose to limit itself in this way, but it did. And that why of creation is a question that we will be able to begin to answer at some further point in our own spiritual evolution beyond earth. But this great outbreaking in creation, when this perfection of God became wrapped up in matter, is a key to what we really are. It's an understanding of our own selves as a divine spark of God, which I think is an incredibly inspiring and profound truth that we can all begin to realize, through our spiritual practice and through our service, etc. And then he talks about the great inbreak, which is basically the return or the realization of these individualized aspects of God back to the state of perfection where they realize themselves as God, and they have gained the necessary experience to have made that journey. And that's our destiny. That's what that's teaching us. So we have an understanding of what we really are, which is the spark of God, and we have an understanding of our destiny, which is to return back to God again, the source from which we all came in the beginning, conscious now of all experience throughout the whole of creation. And I think that, in that short story that he gives, he encapsulates in this outbreathing and this inbreathing, which is this age-old yoga philosophy, right? He encapsulates this vast, all-encompassing truth, which, I've not heard shared succinctly before, in terms of giving us an understanding of like what's really the big picture about why we're here, which is what he does there.
Yeah, when I've been speaking to people, and I try and explain the Aetherius Society teachings, and also one of the reasons I'm doing this Mysticast is because I want to speak to people. But I read a good quote today in a biography of Madame Blavatsky. It says the hardest people to educate are the educated.
Okay, yeah.
And that really, because I thought, if you come along with a massive truth, the people who are going to be the most interested are the theosophists, or maybe Buddhists, or people who are, you're on the path to truth. But it seems to me that after this time, that people get stuck at that level, and they're in a rose garden, or as Dr. King said, and they're not. They've got this much truth, and it's hard to fill the full glass.
I think that, being genuinely open-minded is a very rare quality. And I think that's, something that we will need to actively cultivate within ourselves, to be open to sort of like the proof of logic and also the influence of our own intuition, which can help us to see beyond what might otherwise become dogma for us. But, there are many paths to truth on earth. There's not only one, and there's there's many paths through which you could gain enlightenment. I think the important question is not so much like, literally what are they saying, but ultimately, especially today in the new age, and according to the teachings that we've been given by Mars Sector 6 and others, it's whether service is at the heart of it that really counts. And because that's what, well, I'm stealing my thunder here, but that's what life is really about.
But for why I was saying that was when you're understanding God's purpose. The reason I was saying that is because the block seems to be that everyone thinks that once you've reached this enlightened stage or ascension, that then you can choose to go back to God, and that you're really you lose your body, you merge back into the God spark, you float through.
Totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example, actually, of where these cosmic teachings go beyond a lot of the teachings that we've had on Earth to date, right? Which is that until now, I agree totally, there's this concept of nirvana and, or like even heaven, you feel like that's the point at which you sort of merge into the absolute. But what we're given in the spiritual teachings that Mars Sector 6 gives student Dr. George King is that, that's just a stepping stone to even greater vistas of spiritual evolution that are available to us in our solar system. So beforehand, it was, enlightenment, then cosmic consciousness, and then the point of which you've mastered the full gamut of experience on Earth. And that was, then it was like, well, there was nothing else, right? It's just literally merged into divine. You got no more karma. And it's like, no, that's not it, right? There's this whole journey ahead of us, which begins thereafter with interplanetary experience, which is basically, if you think about it in terms of experience and karma, it's another classroom where we can continue to spiritually evolve and make this journey back to God.
Yeah, because many Buddhists don't realize that, well, the teachings of the Aetherius idea that the Buddha is now in Shambhala. He is the Senate Kumar of the earth, or on Jesus is on Venus, or he's working on another planet or somewhere, but they're still very much physical beings, no?
I think I think it would be hard for someone to sort of, like if you take like your average Christian, for example, to sort of change their view from seeing Jesus as described in the Bible and the teaching that they go to the church and he's up there on the cross and whatnot, to like expand their view of him to someone who is actually an enlightened extraterrestrial being from another planet in our solar system, living on a higher plane of existence, and who incarnated on Earth to not only give these teachings as he did, but literally to die in order to help us to deal with global karma at that time and the catastrophe that would have been falling us. Yeah, I mean, that's that's like a massive, like, consciousness expanding truth, isn't it? It is massive. And I think that the most important thing you can do is to share these spiritual truths with as many people as possible in a way that's as understandable, accessible as possible. And then there's the responsibility of each individual aspirant to take the next step. Yeah, sort of like this hierarchy of spiritual evolution is the way that I like to think about it, which is that at the very top, you have the absolute, which is, what we call God, which is the divine source of all things in creation. That which is all things in creation, that which is even above all things in creation as well. And that which is also within us, right? Within us all. That's the spark of God that I talked about a little bit in the beginning. And so then when we talk about the gods, quote unquote, right, as you described there's sort of like these various levels of spiritual evolution that we can progress through. And as you rightly say, for us, as far as we're concerned, the Mother Earth is a goddess to us because of her supreme wisdom and outstanding spiritual powers, and she's manifesting in planets, so that we can gain experience. And the sun, as you say, the sort of like father of the solar system, from which all things in the solar system came. Yeah, as far as we're concerned, as we're told in the 12 blessings, it's the God of the Bible and the Brahma of the Hindu scripts, right? How it actually works in terms of like the hierarchy after that, I just couldn't say.
Can you fill me in now?
I mean, is our sun an aspect of a greater sun? And is that just an aspect of an even greater sun? For example, I think not just in the theosophical teachings or otherwise, but I think there's some There's some people who talk about the relationship between our sun and Sirius, for example, our sun being an aspect of that, a much greater star. So don't quote me on, but I think you could explore, there's something to explore there. So it's not just like the sun and then the galaxy. I think there's, in the same way
Is there
that
a cosmic god, a solar lord, solar god, solar system entity as well? Or?
I think it's more like, how like a Saturnian being can split its consciousness up into, many thousands of parts and be conscious about every single one of them throughout creation and what they are doing, right? So think of it like a sun, imagine the level of evolution that they're on, in comparison to a Saturnian being who is already, you know, has such great power and abilities as to be beyond our imagination. But what could the logos of a sun do? How many, into how many parts could they split their consciousness? What could they do with each one of their consciousness? Already a Saturnian being, I think, probably a perfect on Saturn, the most advanced Saturnian beings. I think I remember from an extract recently that I was listening to, or that I even played possibly at a recent keynote experience, that they can even be at sea on another planet.
Oh, where'd you hear that?
Dr. King spoke about it in lecture.
That's a benefit of your job is you get access to. So they're not just
Yeah.
like. I thought they would all be just beings, but
I
it
know.
could be.
I know. I was like, whoa. I mean, so just like you start to realize how little concept we have of this. It's not even possible to explain to us, what's possible really, because our concept of creation is so limited. Like we can understand sort of, our own sort of plane in which we exist on and practically materially interact with. But what's the plane that they exist on, and what is it like to live there?
So
Well,
what?
yeah,
Yeah, I was there because my last guest was talking about. He was an expert in UFOs,
oh yeah,
and he was an expert in he many. He'd interviewed many people who'd been not well, I say abducted, but taken on board. And there's all these different testimonies. It's basically like Men in Black, the movie. So there's, you've got the Greys and the reptilians and we know from the Aetherius teachings, there's the Garusians, no, there's the water people, there's cat beings, there's praying mantis people. So there are virtually because each solar system has its own preferred form, no? And we are the humanoid.
I don't know if it's if it's like sort of at a solar system level that would be the case, or even at a galactic level that would be the case. And I mean, we get the impression from the teachings that some of these things are talking about beings elsewhere in our galaxy. But it's not clear to me how sort of prevalent this humanoid form is. I mean, does it go beyond our solar system? Is it sort of like a blueprint for the beings tend to manifest, or even the other beings on our planet? Are they only manifesting in this way for our sake? We know, for example, a natural state on Venus and even on the Saturn is this ovoid shape, right? I mean,
Is that on Venus too?
yeah. And so it's like they aren't, I think you can find that in You're Responsible, where he recounts an experience in a spacecraft with a Venusian and seeing him in this like incandescent ovoid shape. And also he talks about his experience going to Venus, right, projecting there and seeing Patana, his guide, in this ovoid shape, and these millions of things of colors like kind of flowing around him as he experiences the energy radiating from the logos of Venus through the temple there. So this humanoid form, I don't know how far it goes. I don't know to what extent they're only manifesting this for our sake, in order to make us feel more comfortable in interacting together with them. I don't know. Not clear. Yeah.
Because I was just wondering if something occurred to me today, because as you meditate on these teachings, like you say, you get the new. And I was wondering maybe at the nine freedoms, if it's the same for other solar systems, if you become maybe at the eighth freedom, when you do become an ovoid, or now, as you've just told me, actually it's interplanetary, so it's the seventh freedom. And because we can look through a telescope and we see stars, we see planets, so we work backwards, we know that all the other solar systems are solar systems. There are. So maybe there's a time when all these other races reach a certain level of freedom, then they also become an ovoid, as in also if it's just at that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I do recall an extract in which we're told that at the same time that we received the 9 freedoms, other beings on other worlds received their own version of it, right? But what that really means in terms of, their journey through spiritual evolution and in terms of their own solar system and their own planets, I just don't know. I think that, there are a lot of, things there that are obviously universal in
Mm.
terms of, this theme of service and of, as you progress through evolution, you put yourself in a greater and greater position to be of service to more and more life streams. I mean, we can see that in the sun, we can see that in our galaxy, we can see that in the supreme laws of creation, even, So I think obviously these like fundamental truths about what life is really about, which, go back to that in a moment in terms of the meaning of life, are universal in terms of the the journey of these individualized sparks of God that we talked about in the beginning, returning to the Godhead, having gained all necessary experience, which would essentially be greater and greater service to more and more life throughout creation. That's what it would be about.
That's great. You're bringing us back. I really dragged us off there, but yeah, you bring it. What a pro. You bring it back.
Come on.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
service is a universal thing.
yeah, I
All the
think
sons are in service. Everyone's in service.
that's right. That's what they are doing, right?
Yeah.
The suns are giving the opportunity to every single life stream in the solar system to gain the necessary experience in order to return back to the divine source from which we came in the beginning. That's it,
Yeah.
right? That's what it's about. And as I was talking about a little bit last night, it's like we are utterly, completely dependent on this energy that is being radiated by the sun. And it's just hard to imagine, because you kind of think, oh, well, maybe, you know, you know, well, wouldn't we just continue in some way? But how? I mean, the sun is the sun is what is making it possible for us to exist. Not just in a biological way, but literally in terms of the pranic energies which are being radiated by the sun to us. Yeah.
Do you think on like a karmic level that they also need us? Because if there's nobody below you, you've got nobody to serve. The people above you, we can send them energy, but they don't need it.
Well, I think the way I think about it is more like we're all on this journey, right? What the work that we do is to help to raise or transmute all life back to the divine
Yeah.
source. That's what
Important,
we're
yeah.
all doing, right? And so the sun, it may be, for example, that the sun would not need to be here anymore. If all life had evolved up to a certain level, then the sun can progress. You know what I mean? It's like the planet Saturn. I believe I'm right in saying doesn't actually need to be in the solar system any longer in terms of gaining experience necessary to evolve. They are here out of choice, serving all of these other life streams like us.
I think I heard that on an Aetherius radio live with
Yeah.
that when you do that, there's a choice. Most people go on but then one person turns back to be a planet or something like that. So
Yeah, and
you only serve at the level that you know that you can already be above.
it's I think like an interesting kind of analogy for it is our own journey to ascension, right? What we're here on Earth to do, which is kind of like the next step of this meaning of life conversation, is to master the full gamut of experience on Earth, right? So it's like, and this is our classroom, which we are in right now, and so we have all of the experience available in this classroom on Earth that we need to master. That's our sole reason for being here. It's our life purpose. It's our destiny, right? And it may be that the planet Saturn had sort of graduated from the classroom of this solar system and was able to go onwards. Maybe that's the analogy. I don't know.
Well, it's
But
on
it
its
was
eighth life, isn't it? It should only have 7 or something like that.
something like that. Yeah. So it's like maybe in the same way that an individual can graduate from this classroom on Earth right when they achieve ascension, perhaps for a planet even they can also graduate from the classroom that they're in. I just don't know. That's just pure conjecture, right? But I'm just sort of exploring this thought.
You did
But
touched on transmutation, and I just read an interesting from Richard Lawrence, that very interesting blog article about how Shiva is essentially out of date or is essentially from old teachings. Could you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I think what he was saying, and I don't want to speak for him, but in terms of the way that Shiva is portrayed as the destroyer, is like, well, what Rich is saying is that in the teachings of Mars Sector 6, we now understand in the new interpretation of the AU that it's not about transmigration, which is about soul progressing, but more about transmutation, which is about raising everything up to another level, not just consciousness, but even matter up to another level. And that every act of service is an act of transmutation in terms of helping in that process. And so,
not to offend any Hindus, but
yeah, not at all. I mean, we're not sort of like, there's not a criticism of any other religion, or this is just sharing the insights of these spiritual teachings and what we have now been given, right? What everyone on earth has been given through, thanks to Mars Sector 6, through Dr. George King, is this new cosmic revelations, which, to go back to one of the questions you said right in the beginning, like, well, what's new, what's different? Well, this is something that definitely is new and different.
And you have to really, to understand this, I still don't have a full appreciation of it, but just Dr. King said that if you're an expert in metaphysics, this idea of transmutation instead of transmigration is the most mind-blowing thing. We know more than the Brahmins did and all the ancients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just with this simple thing.
That's right.
I still have trouble understanding why, but so I guess you need more knowledge of metaphysics.
Well, I think the reason why they would be so blown away is because the sort of like the age-old truth that we had been given was about, we can use like our own personal experience as a proxy for this. It's like, you go within, you develop yourself, you raise your consciousness, and you achieve a cosmic consciousness and ascension, and then you can leave Earth, right? But what we're saying here in the new interpretation is that the implication is that the implication is that you cannot go back to God unless everything goes back to God. Not even a galaxy can return to the original potential without everything within the galaxy returning back.
Wow,
So
that's a big ask.
yeah, so it's like every single one of us needs to evolve up to a level that will make that possible, right? There's nothing that can go back to go with it. It's like if you and a friend were attached by a rope, right? And one of you was a completely dedicated spiritual aspirant, and you were willing to make the journey up the mountain, right? But your friend wasn't, and your friend stayed on the ground. And that rope was just not long enough for you to cover the entire distance back to God before you started to pull on him, right? It'd be like, you can't actually get there without him also getting there together with you. I mean, it doesn't work completely because you could take one step and then maybe you'd make it. But the point is that we're all one, right? And if you realize that we're all one, that there is this oneness throughout creation, and that this is not just about individual aspects trying to return to divinity, but the whole of creation returning to the potential, then of course service is the one and only way, because it's through service that we help to raise all life, all matter, all consciousness back to the divine, right? That's what we're saying.
That's beautiful way you explained it, yeah, because all the other teachings who I was dishing on them before, they all say we are all one. Every spiritual person who has an enlightenment or a trip, they realize the oneness of everything, but they maybe haven't made that connection that you just made, that we're all one, yeah, we're all one, but you can't go back without helping everyone if you're tied to them.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, of course, well, it's still true. Everybody who's able to raise their consciousness, anyone who achieves money would dramatically would change the karma of Earth, right? And they would change the consciousness of Earth. But what we're saying is that is not enough, right? We're saying it's the active work of service that we need at this time. There just isn't time anymore, given the pace of the emerging new age, for us to focus on our own personal development at the expense of the dire immediate needs of other people around us, right? It's sort of like we need to go out into the world and help to raise, inspire, teach others so that they are inspired to take the steps to realize their own divinity, right? That's what it's about. We need to raise everybody. It's not just about our own personal escape from suffering. And that's why even, when we do our spiritual practices, yes, there's some wonderful benefits of doing them just, for ourselves, but our primary motivation really is about helping to develop ourselves so that we can be of greater service to others, right? That's that's the way to think about it now. And so going within and developing ourselves helps us to be more effective when we pray, helps us to give greater spiritual healing, helps to attune ourselves to high consciousness of wisdom that we can share with other people, right? And prepares us for greater service.
Because yeah, that's something else I heard from Richard on the Aetherius Radio Live, that there was an allowance in cosmic law, in karmic law, for, for people to go into caves and do their meditation practices. But now, because of the quickening, that now, and it's actually better because we're in line with the law of the other planets.
That's right. He did say that. He was saying that we're very much more aligned now with that wisdom and the way that they operate, right? Which is they devote their entire existence to service, and even
no monetary system.
not even their own personal advancement per se. It's more about advancing on this journey of spiritual evolution so that they can be of greater service. That's what becoming a Saturnian puts you in a position to do. That's what becoming a solar lord will put you in a position to do.
It was just suddenly the idea of, while you were talking, the idea of ants and bees came into my mind, and how we used to be able to do that, but now we've somehow, in our advancement, we've forgotten that.
Ants and bees, go on.
Yeah, because they're always working in a hive. They've got no thought. They've got no idea of their individuality today. They're just working. They'd sacrifice their life for the queen.
I see. I think it might have something to do with us choosing free will of, and choosing to use our free will. And now we're faced with the challenge of using our free will to realize our divinity. That's now the challenge that we have, right? So that's the journey that we're on. We're on the journey of using our free will to choose to serve, right? Which is love and practical action. That's what wisdom is about. And in so doing, helping ourselves to advance. And in the words that Mars Sector 6 gives us, causing the Kundalini, which is the secret of spiritual evolution, to rise in a natural, unforced fashion, open each of our chakras and help us to realize our divinity. That's what it's about.
Oh, so talk a little bit about that then, because Dr. King did say that we are here on for one reason, and that's to raise Kundalini. So many people, maybe they want to do Kundalini yoga or something like that, if that's the purpose.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, in the context of us understanding this big picture about God's purpose for the whole of creation, which is to evolve through experience back to the divine, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what does that mean for our own life purpose? How do we realize this divinity ourselves? How do we make this journey back to the divine, right? And the key, he says, is raising Kundalini. That's the only reason we're here. And that everything else that we do is just an aspect of this. Raising Kundalini is the secret to spiritual evolution. It's the key to mastering the full gamut of experience on Earth. But what is it? I think it's a good question. A lot of people may not have heard this word before. If they've heard it, who knows what in what context. So the Kundalini is a mystical power at the base of the spine, right? Sometimes it's referred to as the serpent power, because often depicted as a coiled serpent. I think that's broadly what the Sanskrit word Kundalini means, right? This power is responsible for our consciousness. And we just simply couldn't live without it. It's something strangely which is virtually dormant in all of us, even though it's absolutely essential to our consciousness in that way, which leads us to believe that there's an enormous amount of untapped potential there, which is the point, right? Which is that Kundalini is the key to all spiritual powers and enlightenment. And if we're able to raise this power up the spine, not up the front of the body, but up the spine in the way that many advanced yogis are able to do, then we will begin to realize the potential of each of our chakras. We'll bring them into this vibrant, living vitality. And Dr. King has this amazing series of experiences which he shares in the 9 Freedoms, actually, where he's talking about what you will experience, what he experienced when Kundalini pierced each one of the chakras and, brought it in himself into this vibrant vitality. it's when I read that, it's like mesmerizing, some of the things that he describes there, but that's what's happening. If you raise Kundalini up the spine and goes through each of the chakras, you're bringing these into vitality, you're beginning to realize your divine potential. And when you can raise this to the top of your head, to the Brahma chakra, when you can do that at will, you are, you are ready for the initiation of ascension. Like that.
You can take down a mountain once you're ascended now, or you have enough power to. That's
The
why.
spiritual powers they have, are beyond really our understanding.
So that's why it's such a painful, difficult, incredibly difficult.
I think what I would say is that's why it's about mastering all experience on earth, because it's like having the wisdom of master that experience that gives us access to this tremendous power, which we would not be able to manage in any vaguely or remotely responsible way if we did not have that wisdom. You know what I mean?
And does it raise, if you do live a life of service and you don't do any pranayama, you don't do any mantra, and can it rise up Shushumna without any pain, or without you, even if you don't have very good concentration? Can it just naturally rise?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely beyond my own experience. But I would say, if we just turn to the words of Master Sector 6, he says, will rise in a natural, unforced fashion. And I have to imagine, although this is just conjecture, I have to imagine that it means that we'll be naturally drawing up this power so that we can express it through our heart chakra, because the work that we are doing is an expression of true selfless love. That's what he's saying. Any form of selfless service as an expression of true selfless love, true unconditional love, will cause the rise of this power. And
Do you mean someone like Mother Teresa, or who's living every moment in service, or that kind of model, and then you're just flowing with love and it happens?
Well, I mean, I think they would be drawing it up. Yeah, I think they would be drawing it up naturally. I don't literally know what the experience would be like. I just am certain of the logic that service in this way will lead to a natural, unforced rise of this. It seems to me that would be the painful type of rise that you would experience if you were using practices which force the rise of Kundalini. And again, those practices can be extremely dangerous. Right? I mean, Dr. King talks about how they, if you make a mistake with those, it's not like a sore head or bruised ankle kind of situation. It's like you can cause yourself madness or physical disability for lives to come. I mean, it's a very, very, very serious undertaking, right? Only advisable, if at all, under the strictest guidance of a true spiritual master. And, the advice, obviously, that would be given by Master Sector 6 is that it's service really that is the best approach for us to take as spiritual aspirants. Not just for the reason we described, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So we should still do some exercises just so we can be pray better, be better healers.
It's a great point. Yeah, going within is still essential, right? It's still essential. It's an intimate part of your own, of creating this virtuous circle of enlightenment, where our primary motivation for going within is to develop ourselves. And of course, if we, we need to develop ourselves to some extent to be of the best service that we can. Even beings on Saturn will go into these like periods of thousands of years in deep meditation, right? So that they can come out with and being of even greater service to others.
Yeah.
And so when we're going within, it is with that primary motivation that to develop ourselves, because these two things are like breathing, completely interdependent, right? It's like if you the more either the breathing in, call it, would be like your personal development, and the breathing out would be about the expression of service. And you can't really be truly successful in one without the other. And that's what I think. That's, if we're looking for a life of real success, it'd be about serving others and developing ourselves to be of even greater service. That's what it would be about, right? So in terms of coming back to Kundalini for a moment, I think, we must treat it with true caution and reverence. I think, there are a lot of dangerous practices for forcing the rise of this Kundalini. There are also a lot of practices which are called Kundalini something or other, but they're not really going to raise this power up the spine in the way that Dr. King talks about, in the way that these like yogi adepts are able to do. But, as far as you and I are concerned, the way that we should be approaching this, or the way that Master Sector 6 is is telling us to approach this is to serve others and let this happen naturally. Yeah.
It's interesting that, yeah, Dr. King, he had to do it for 10 years, 8 hours a day after work, full on exercises. And Jesus, 40 days, 40 nights. All the masters, the adepts as well, the Buddha, all the cosmic beings who come here, who are born through the womb to influence our, for karmic reasons so that they can help us. They all have to do this intense practice to raise Kundalini because they're born with our karma from
Yeah, I think for them it's sort of like, think about the context of their life, right? They're an advanced being from another planet beyond ascension on, in terms of our level of spiritual evolution, right? They've come here to do a job, they have a life to do it. So, it's like they need to get themselves into position as quickly as possible where they have achieved this state of realization so that they can perform their mission.
yeah.
And think about the level of advancement of a soul like that.
Yeah, and they're choosing to come back into the pigsty.
That's right, with just an aspect of their consciousness. Every, we look at their greatness in comparison to us on Earth. What they achieved, the wisdom, the teaching, the legacy that they left, and that's just a fraction of their consciousness. You know what I mean? It's not even like that was Jesus. No, it's not. That was a fraction of Jesus. That was a fraction. And yet he was able to, he left legacy that he did, he did teachings that he did, and he was able to stave off at that time, a catastrophe that we're told would have set us back another 5,000 to 7,000 years because of the karmic implications of him suffering at that moment, which he suffered. Yeah.
Well, imagine so a whole planet of these people. I mean, the level of, and then the consciousness of a planet, which is all of them merged together. Just I can't even.
Yeah, I can't
conceive of
even
it.
conceive of, what a planet of being. I think I said this in one of my recent Kingo experiences, which is like, try to imagine that everybody on these other planets are more advanced, more enlightened than the most advanced and enlightened person on Earth. An entire planet of them more enlightened than the most enlightened person on Earth. It's like, think about what existence would be like. Think about the way that they would cooperate together for the highest spiritual ideals. It's like, think about how, the way they would coordinate their efforts in order to serve other civilizations throughout the galaxy. I mean, it's like there's no limit almost to what that would be possible to them.
Well, they have trees that are more intelligent than me.
And me. So, it's like, yeah, when we really begin to think about how advanced they are, but also to realize that it is also our spiritual destiny to achieve the same things that they have. It's like, it becomes no longer just something that we step back in awe, although of course we do that, but also there comes within us the sort of realization that, man, I can do that too. It's like, and therefore I have a responsibility to try to do that. Which I think is, well, for me, that's where part of the inspiration is. It's sort of like, wow, it's not just like, wow, good for them, they did it, fantastic, but I can't ever do that. It's like, wow, they did it, and that's an inspiration for all of us here on Earth, right? About what life could be like if we wanted to be like them. If we wanted to create a civilization and a world like theirs, we could.
They must spend a lot of their time worrying about us and going back to the strata of gods. I remember in one teaching it said that the bumblebee was a gift from Venus. Is that right?
Really? I've not heard that.
I
Yeah.
think so. So I think if we extrapolate that, and if our scientists now, one of their hobbies or one of their fantasies is creating life, and they are, they're doing all this bioengineering, they're cloning, and these scientists are amoebas compared to these other. So I think that they are because the job is always given to the lowest for karmic reasons, yeah, to the lowest person in the class. That these other beings, they created our bodies and maybe some of them are responsible for building the trees, and some of them are responsible for building the reptiles, and some of them help,
Yeah,
trade our DNA.
yeah, I just don't know about that. As in, literally, I don't know. but
Right.
but I think that, in terms of do they worry about us and all, that point that you were making. I think it goes out saying that, first of all, they love us more than we can really comprehend, because of their greater realization of God, just as a starting point. And I think their greater realization of God is also, a part of a part of that is their greater realization of not only our current position in evolution, but also our potential. And they can see our spiritual potential. And the message that you'll see, the theme that you'll see over and over and over and over again in the teachings is speaking to that potential within us. You would hear the Master Sector 6 say it, the Master Aetherius say it, like almost like coaxing us, inviting us to realize what we really are and what we're capable of, that we are gods in the making, that we are angels. I think Master Sector 6 uses that word. So it's like, obviously the dead matter of fact about, our current position and like circumstances in which we find ourselves. But at the same time, they balance that with this tremendous aspiration that they give us about realizing what we really are. And, I think that's a part of the expression of this tremendous love which they have for us. And do they worry about us a lot? I think, if you read Life on the Planets, for example, you'll see how much it pained them to see our fall, and that it took some help for them to see that that was within, God's will even.
You must
The,
wonder if how many of us, you have any numbers? How many of us have graduated from a section of it's Atlantis, Lemurius,
Gosh,
Melvin?
I would love to know that. I would love to be able to read the Akashic records and just like know this stuff, just
Yeah.
like, okay, so really, how many ascended masters are there on Earth right now? Because I don't know, maybe there's a few hundred. I just don't know. I literally have no idea. I've never seen it written down anywhere. I trust anyway. And then, and Dr. King or lectures. So how many gone on to life on the other planets? Well, it would be amazing to know that, I feel. So, yeah, these questions.
But did we answer your, because you had those 1, 2, 3 points, understanding God's purpose, and then,
Well, let me wrap them up by just saying that, God's purpose, right? That's the first thing that we talked about, which is spiritual evolution through experience. That's what it's really about. It's about returning to the source from which we all came in the beginning, conscious of all experience. The second thing is about how that relates to our purpose on Earth. And our purpose on Earth, as Dr. King says, is to raise Kundalini. That's the key to spiritual evolution. It's the key to mastery over all experience here. It's the reason why we're here. It's our destiny, right? But what do we actually have to do? How do we raise this power? Without any of the dangers associated with it? That's service. So that's Master Sector 6, teaching us in the third freedom that service, in the expression of true selfless love, will lead to the natural unforced rise of Kundalini. And that's what we're being told to do. So it's, for us, of course, there's in the broader context of the 9 freedoms, it's sort of like the way which is aligned with the cosmic masters, which is the sort of like universal truth about life, is that we're sort of evolving in order to serve more. And the way to do that obviously is to serve, right? Because that leads to your spiritual evolution, and then you get this like wonderful virtuous cycle that starts to happen. And especially in our world today, when we just can't afford to develop ourselves at the expense of so many other people in need, service really is the way.
I keep coming back to that analogy. You said the oneness, and we are all one. So therefore, it's obvious that you think about it, we have to serve each other, and climbing up the mountain with a rope and to the other person. And I'm reminded of the last time I did climb a mountain, and I was super prepared myself. I took care of myself. So
Yeah.
I had enough lot of food. I had
Yeah.
nice hot tea, and I had some spare underclothes, and I had some nice fresh socks because because my feet got wet. I thought of different possibilities. But what I didn't realize is that I'm with other people. So I was climbing with a few other people, and they ran out of food. So Obviously, when you're on a mountain, you share your food. So I got hungry because I didn't have enough food for, and and I wet, so I gave them my clothes, as you do. You're sharing on a mountain. You don't want people to suffer because you have to carry them down. So it's all selfish motives,
Yeah.
and so I was cold, and then I had wet feet, but I give my socks. So now I'm selfish. Now I'm selfless out of selfish interests because I know we're all climbing together.
If you could see it that way, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so I need to help everyone else because karma yoga is the way, but just so that I don't suffer.
Yeah. Well, even if that is the motive in the beginning, I would say don't worry about it, right? Because the more that you actually do serve other people in that way, the more it will actually transmute whatever selfishness is there so that it actually starts to become an expression of selfless love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, you think about these, when you're prepping and you're worried about disasters and things can happen and you've got enough canned food for 6 months. But, just imagine if that really does happen. All the people that would be coming to your door, you wouldn't turn them away. You'd divide your food. So you'd only end up. So all this idea of looking out for yourself is fine at the moment. But when we're all suffering together, it counts for nothing. So we should have had that same attitude for our day-to-day activities before there's a crisis or we're stuck on a mountain.
Yeah, I think basically the essential wisdom of not even a galaxy can return back to God, by itself, then certainly we can't either. And just, that's the sort of the lessons that we are being offered in this classroom of experience is to help the group soul of humanity to advance and to evolve up to a certain level. Not just try to advance ourselves, but to see the essential spiritual logic that unless we do it as a whole, we'll never be able to make all the journey the whole way.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense because when we're looking for opportunities to serve, we only think of like a homeless shelter or an orphanage. Those are people. But if it's to raise everyone to our level, we can surely see people who are suffering in different ways. Maybe that's helping them read a book or or cook a meal, share everything. It's
There's so many ways to serve, right? There's so many ways. There's no shortage of ways. That I think the key is that it's all about helping people to their own realization of what they really are. It's helping people to their own realization of divinity. That's what we're doing when we're serving. And everything that we do, even the reading and writing that you talk about, it's all an aspect of this journey. It's all an aspect of mastering experience on earth. It's all part of what it means to graduate from this classroom and achieve ascension. In the theory side, of course, the service that we emphasize and that we talk about is the spiritual service, being, how we can become a channel for spiritual energy, either in giving spiritual healing or in radiating this energy out to the world as a whole, or even to specific areas in need, after an earthquake or an area in famine or whatever else, so that we can help to inspire other people to be, well, it raise the consciousness of other people so they can be more inspired by their own higher selves, so that this energy may help to bring a greater state of healing within them, etc. That's the kind of thing that's happening there. So, these are things that if only there were more people doing, can you imagine the sort of the way that we'd be able to raise the consciousness of humanity and change global karma for the better? That's what this is all about, right? That's like what we do in King Yoga, which is the spiritual path. But even if people don't believe in that, if people think that prayer is just wishful thinking, if they don't, if there's still so much that we can as an expression of selfless love. So if you don't believe in that, do whatever you believe in, right? In terms of, it's not like that means that you shouldn't serve. It just means that you should serve in whatever way that you believe in. And there's still so many ways. And if everyone did that, can you imagine the kind of world that we would live in? It'd be completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly pulled me up the mountain a little bit today. You got me up a few feet there.
Pleasure talking to you, Jack. Thank you.
And when you get all these answers, you promise to come back and talk to me.
Yeah, in about a million years when I know the answer to some of these things. Yeah.
I'll still be here, so you promise.
I don't think so.
I might be on another planet. You might have to go there. But anyway. Thanks so much, Darren. It's been really a blast.
Yeah, it's been great speaking to you, Jack. Wish you all the best of the podcast, and thanks for having me on.
No worries. Real pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.